All right, welcome everybody to our latest Live Motocross podcast as we talk all things AMA, Pro Motocross ahead of Hangtown and look back on Fox Raceway from what was a cracking opening with the great man Jason Thomas and also special guest Ben Townley. All right, before we welcome them, firstly, thank you everyone for listening and supporting the site. We really appreciate it. Obviously, we start off by thanking Fly Racing. Obviously, Fly Racing is aimed to provide customers with the very best in off-road performance products, led by the revolutionary Formula S Smart Helmet. Fly Racing continues to push innovation in safety to new levels. Never before has style and technology blended together so seamlessly as the 2025 Fly Racing lineup. For more info, check out flyracing.com. Check out your local dealers and obviously follow them on social media and cheer for all the athletes across the globe. Obviously, massive shout out to Firepower Batteries too. Go check them out and all their excellent offerings. Obviously, they joined forces with heavy hitters in the industry like Club MX. So, yeah, be sure to give them a follow and head to the website. All right, firstly, welcome JT. How's life and thanks for joining us. Good to be back into motocross, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks. It is good to be back. I don't know if you ask me this coming Saturday at about 4 p.m. If it's good to be back or not. I don't know that I'm going to have the same answer for you because it's going to be, I guess, 40 degrees Celsius, which is 102 Fahrenheit. So it's going to be a rough weekend, but I did very, very much enjoy the opening round. I'll leave it there anyway.
Absolutely. And obviously, welcome to Ben Townley. The podcast we did a couple of weeks ago was the most listened to ever on our platform, I believe. So great to have you back on, mate, to share your opinions and insights from the racing. So, how are you?
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me again. I really enjoyed it. It was great doing a bit of bench racing with JT, and he's obviously right in the mixer of it, and I'm removed from a long way. I'm only seeing it from the armchair here in Europe, so I really enjoyed having a chinwag about what we did and with Supercross, and now onto the motocross. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And just on the topic of that, JT, great job on the broadcast. The package that gets delivered to, people across the globe, be in Australia, Ben in Europe at the moment, and even for the Kiwis back home, it's really immense. And obviously you, Weed, Stu, and all the crew provide really excellent insight. So that started off at the pre-race press conference. You and Weed hosted some really great stuff in there, including that Jett Lawrence statement. So just talk us through how it was from your perspective. How was the shift from Supercross to outdoors, mate?
Yeah, I think the team works really well together, and honestly, for me, I'm just trying to kind of hold up my end of the bargain. As we speak, I'm staring at a review sheet from we have a broadcast coach and then several layers of management above me that they're my friends, but also they're my bosses. But they're telling me where could I be better? What did they like? And it's never a negative. It's just, hey, if you did this, it would really be better, and we like the direction you're going with this type of thing. And we're really trying to make the show the best possible is the point. I know for speaking for myself and James and Supercross team, of course, as well, Ricky and everybody, we have so much respect for this sport. And in the end, we're all fans of it. We happen to be on television talking about it, and we happen to have raced our whole life. But if we had never gone pro, if things had gone differently, we would still be fans watching alongside everybody else. My weekends would be a little bit more freed up, but I would be doing the same thing I'm doing, which is watching every single lap of every single race and then talking to somebody about it. Just so happens that people seem to care what I'm saying, or I have this opportunity to say it to a lot more people than I would otherwise. So it was an interesting weekend. The press conference kicked off on Friday. Jett addressed a lot of the things that have been going on around him outside of necessarily the racetrack. But I thought overall, just off the track, it was a pretty strong opening weekend. Storylines everywhere. A lot of riders were as advertised. We got crazy stuff that surprised us. So if, just on a basic entertainment level, I thought the racing delivered on all fronts.
I got to jump in quickly because I thought your best call of the weekend, which not everyone would have heard because not everyone would have seen the press conferences, when you made a little comment of why Levi Kitchen, you're expecting a different response when he changed seat from the middle of the table to the outside of the table. I thought that was one of the best calls of the weekend, JT, to be fair. But you didn't get what you're looking for. You didn't get what you're looking for, but
Yeah. I appreciate it. No, I was hoping he would just say, yeah, I don't really like him or anything. Just give me something.
Oh, it was gold. It must be pretty nerve-wracking doing that sort of format, mate. But I guess we'll touch on that and then obviously go into the racing. We'll start with Jett. Obviously, all the hype and sort of news and drama surrounding him heading in. Obviously, the Myrtle incident, another one, and obviously Jett had the bodyguard there, which was pretty interesting. But yeah, he sort of silenced all that with his riding, and you could see the outpouring of emotion afterwards. He sort of had a big release there. But yeah, really statement ride. And I asked you last week, JT, what were your expectations, and you said 1-1, and Jett certainly held up his end of the bargain, didn't he, mate? So great race by him, and just awesome to have him back out there, even though it could be a long summer for his competitors.
Yeah, it's man, it's really hard to put into words how often and how impressive this kid can just upend expectations, because we knew this was possible. We knew it was possible, because if you think about last September, and every time there's any sort of doubt or can he do something, he does it, So in that thought, it's like, why wouldn't we think he would win? But man, he's coming back earlier than everybody thought that he could or should. I remember Honda at the very beginning of this talking with Brandon Wilson and Lars, and they were like, well, maybe we let him ride the opening round, possibly. But we're not sure, because we plan on having, a significant amount of money tied up in this kid for a very long time. And him coming back for one round or two rounds is a very small thing in the big picture of what we have planned for Jett Lawrence. So to go from there to going 1-1 at the opening round, it's just so Jett. It is so Jett, to do it the way he did, to manage the race in the fashion he did, to go fast when he needed and it wasn't like he was perfect. We talked about on the race, that one corner, Eli was, I still am surprised that Jett didn't figure out that inside line, because Eli was making, I don't know, a half a second a lap there every lap, and he was still able to overcome that. And there were just some sections on the racetrack where I don't know that a human could go faster through some of the sections of the track than he was. And that's just, man, for someone his age, and I'd love to hear Ben's take on this, but for someone his age, and we've seen it for 2 years now, he has this ability to manage races, and the patience and the discipline he has to not override the track, not override the situation, not get flustered by pressure, and manage all this mentally. And then he doesn't care if he wins by 2 seconds. That's fine. That's in the end what he was planning the whole time. It's just such a rare thing to be able to mentally compartmentalize all of those different dynamics and then deliver in a way that gets the job done damn near every time.
I can't really add any more to that. The way that you have articulated what you're seeing there, and and what we've all seen from the broadcast, all I can say on top of that is you're just watching greatness in the present time. That's what you're seeing. And I've thought about this, just I've got here for tonight and whatnot, and that's really what it is. And that's not taking anything away from Eli Tomac. Like he's obviously one of the greats in the record books, and Hunter Lawrence is, certainly going to be there for a long time as well, and it's going to be a good rider. But you're watching, if not one of the greatest of all time, in my opinion. And that's why you see so many of those points that JT's talking about, the way he's able to handle the pressure, be so composed, be content with not winning the race by X amount of seconds and just getting to the finish line in first position. And just the way that he carries himself around the track and is able to, like JT said, normally he can pick up on things that he needs to pick up on. So it was a little surprising. But I mean, really in the big picture, I didn't expect anything less, to be honest. I expected what he did. I expected what Eli did, and I expected Hunter to be there as well. And I'm not surprised at all what Chase did. So if we look at the big picture, and it's really interesting to hear the inside of how Honda the corporate level was viewing it. But if you didn't hear that piece of that scenario of them potentially not allowing him to race, I would expect him to be there. We saw that when he entered the SMX playoffs last year, and he is, I feel like, probably more prepared in a sense this time because, going into those playoffs there, it's, it was something, it was a push to get there. Whereas this time I felt like, from what I'd read and heard, he'd had more time on the bike and was certainly ready to go with his riding time. So, yeah, not a surprise for me at all with him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, lads. And just a couple more on JT. Obviously, back to you. That second moto, you were watching that obviously at the track. Were you expecting Tomac to get past at some point? Obviously, Jett not usually having that much pressure throughout a whole race. So it was really impressive. You look what you've said, basically it was a combination, precision, power, finesse, and fitness, which was super impressive at that elite level. To really control the races impressively despite all that pressure. And that's 8 from 8 from Fox Raceway. And the scary thing is he's obviously got more gains to make on the bike and with himself. And have you got any more sort of insight on that bodyguard and the Myrtle drama surrounding him as well? But yeah, it was just a complete weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I think there was so much noise around Jett for him to be able to do what he did was something special. I mean, to have an armed bodyguard at the line with you, I've never seen that. So for Jett to be able to put out all that out of his mind, the legal stuff, the videos that have been put out, there's a lot happening, and Jett. It's not like Jett was handling all of this incredibly well. Like you could see that it was weighing on him heavily, and it's just amazing that when it really came down to it, mentally, he was able to just say, okay, that's all happening, but not right now. For the next 35 minutes, I'm going to be the best motocross racer alive. And then when that's over, I'll go back to worrying about all these other things that are troubling me. Like that is just so rare. I haven't been in this particular place that Jett is, like dealing with the same things, but we've all dealt with personal problems, relationships failing, financial worries. Like there's a lot that can enter your psyche and get you off your game. And I know Ben's felt it. I don't even know what the circumstances are, but everyone that has raced at a high level knows what it's like to try to lock in and focus and deliver your best performance when something is very wrong in your world. It is so incredibly difficult to do because you can't focus. You're thinking about it while you're on the racetrack. You can't really lock into what you're doing. He was able to do that, which it just speaks more to what this kid that we're watching is. It's something special. I run out of superlatives to lay on the kid, and a lot of people don't like it. I take a lot of negative comments or whatever, but I promise you, if that's what I see and what I feel, it's not going to deter me because I've seen the best, including Ben. I've seen everybody come through, and there's so much talent that has been in and around the sport. And then there are some other guys that we're just like, that guy's a little different. Like I watched James Stewart when he's in his prime. I'm like, I've never seen anybody ride like that before, ever. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody that has this collection of talents, the racecraft, the skill on a motorcycle, like really, really specific skills on a motorcycle to put it where he wants to find it and find ways to be the most efficient racer. Or if he needs to sprint, he can somehow just in the middle of a lap, just immediately pick up his pace and sprint. He just has all these tools in the toolbox that I think they're just separators.
Yeah, I think the key word there is the collection. That's the key word that sums it all up, right? You've nailed it with that, and all the points that you put inside that collection. It's phenomenal that someone of his age is able to have that collection in his toolbox, like you said, at this point in time, and it's pretty cool to watch. It is very, very cool to sit back and watch, and I think what makes it so special. Adds to it being so special is the broadcast that we have, with the detail that yourself, JT, and James, and if it's Ricky there, and Weege, and the way that we're able to see it and hear about it and dissect it all, I think makes it even better for us as fans. That's what we were saying earlier before we actually started recording this. We're just fans, right? And to me, that makes it super special to witness it. I think, I say that to my boys all the time. You're witnessing something super great here, and it's a pretty cool time to absorb that as a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And obviously, you touched on Sexton there, BT, briefly. Obviously, your comments on him got a bit of feedback as well from the last time, which were really interesting. And obviously, I suppose you can follow after JT, Ben. But yeah, crazy day for Sexton, wasn't it? It was 10th in the first qualifying, then appeared to get it together. And heading in JT, we were sort of pretty confident he was the one man. He had the continuity, he had the fitness, he had the base. He wasn't coming back from an injury, so we thought it'd all go to plan, and it certainly didn't with that crash and the goggle issue, and just a shocking sort of horror day for him. 0 points, and you go to Hangtown where he had that epic ride, but definitely not the way he wanted to start things off, was it?
No, I got this one way wrong. I thought he had the least, variables or hurdles or obstacles to get through to have a good day. He just should be prepared. He should have everything, it should just be another Saturday at the races. And yes, the discipline changes, but I know first, I'd say firsthand, but have it on good authority that he had been riding motocross for quite a while, at least a couple days a week, because he kind of knew it was not going to likely happen for Supercross, and he would need a web mistake anyway. Like, I think he felt like he could win races, and he was more reliant on a web mistake to do it. So he just kind of leaned into motocross and started practicing and preparing for that. So I just thought it would be, not that he was going to dominate. He just had the clearest pathway to a solid opening round. And then I don't know that it can go much worse than that. Unless you're laying in a hospital bed Sunday night, I don't think it can be any worse than that. You qualify poorly right out of the gate, which mentally he can't handle. He has proven that he has a really difficult time bouncing back from early setbacks early in a day, early in a championship. He really struggles to find his composure and put it out of his mind the way that Ken Roxon can, Cooper Webb can. I've seen countless guys be like, who cares? It's literally, it's just practice. Like, I don't care. Chase can't really do that. And you saw it, like, he bounced back, better session, but he was still slower than Jett in the second one, which I think matters. That is another variable in this storyline. And then it just continued to snowball the wrong direction. Like, gets an okay start, but he sees Jett out front. Then he has this weird goggle issue. Then he can't do anything past that because he can't see. And then he hits neutral and crashes in one of the most awkward crashes I've seen in years. It was just a catastrophic day on all fronts for Chase.
Yeah, look, on paper, you're 100% right in the way you analysed it heading in, JT. Like, he had the best pathway going into the event, and the way you'd summarise it, he should expect to perform. But I just think that so many times what you touched on there is the mental side of his application to racing. And that's, I think, the last time we spoke, I talked in depth about that. And I don't know if it was before we spoke last time, that last podcast, or after, but I watched this thing that he did with Vital, with the English guy. I forget the guy's name.
Lewis.
And with Lewis. And man, he was just in like complete disarray, I would say, after that Supercross championship. And I watched it and thought that cannot be helping his approach to this. He should have been just putting to bed. What's done's done. That championship's over. I'm going to put that behind me, learn and move forward. But he was in just complete disarray. And I sort of took that on board thinking, you can't enter into a championship that is going to bring even more competition, more, the level that Jett and Eli are going to bring to the table when they return to racing is only going to, put more weight and pressure, on Chase. And as it turns out, you could see that as soon as number 18 and number 3 are on the track, it just piles that pressure onto him in the way that he's thinking. He can't. It's like the fog comes in and he can't have clarity around what he's doing. And you talk to even further to that in more detail. As soon as he had an issue with the goggles, he should have been instantly into the pit lane. But that then snowballed right into the accident or the crash that we saw occur. And how do you even get to neutral? Like that
I know,
part
especially
of
on a factory transmission, right? It's so difficult.
Fourth gear, JT, approaching that jump. How it has to be minimum fourth gear. How on earth do you even get to neutral? So I don't know. Like, it just speaks to the mindset and where he's at mentally with his racing. And I truly believe, I said this already, and I'm going to now say it a second time, until he can really rewire himself mentally for his racing approach, we're never going to see what he's truly capable of, because I do genuinely feel that he has a skill set and a racecraft below, from the shoulders down, that is probably the only one that can, in going forward in the coming years, be capable of racing Jett, to his fullest capacity. But yeah, it ain't going to happen with the way that he's approaching his racing currently. So it's unfortunate to see, but it just is what it is.
It's crazy, and I'd love your perspective on this. So I'm basically asking you a question. I think most riders, if you were going to ask them why do they have like a mental block, or what do they struggle with, I think a lot of them would be like, I'm not fast enough. So I always feel like I'm kind of behind. If anything goes wrong, I don't have the raw speed to do much with these guys. So I have to find some other way to get this job done. For Chase, it's like the complete opposite. I always feel like he can be the fastest guy. I certainly felt like he was the fastest guy in Supercross once Jett left, but it seems like it's the opposite for him, where I feel like I would derive a lot of confidence from being like, yeah, I'm the fastest guy here. And he doesn't seem like he can do anything with that. Like I just can't figure out why he's not using that as an asset. And it feels like it's almost a liability for him.
Yeah, you're 100% right. That is exactly what's going on. And there's no doubt, that he should be, or he is, sorry, in speed-wise, one of the fastest two. No, you wouldn't even say 3, because he probably has a small edge over Eli and just raw speed in that sense, like you're saying. But how he doesn't actually use that as an asset is beyond me as well. And that's why I go back to what I said last time. It's not really any different in a sense. He needs a mentor in that sense, that can get inside his head with him and strategize and work out, how he's thinking, and rewire that thinking so that he can then ride to his capabilities. So probably I don't really have a lot to add to what I did when we last talked. It's just a real shame to see, to be honest. And I hope that he's okay. Do you have any sort of detail on that, JT?
I don't expect him to be there this weekend. I don't even know that official decision's been made, but I don't expect to see him at Hangtown this weekend.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. It's such a confusing situation to me, and it has been for a long time. As a racer, I cannot express how strongly I would covet his skills at riding. And then I watch him and I see the confidence of someone who is wildly underskilled mentally. You know what I mean? Mentally. And it just, the two don't add up to me at all. It's crazy.
Yeah. And that's why you see what we see, really. That's, the end result is what we see. Yeah. And that's, I think, if you look back really, every time, I know, like, it's easy to say this, but every time Jett's on the gate, it seems to be a huge component of what must be a distraction from his own mental approach to his racing, So that's crazy to think. I don't know if, how that's happened, but it's certainly it seems to be a component of it.
Yeah, it's a really great conversation. I guess you can touch on this too, boys, but you look at Jett, I guess it must compound, Chase's frustrations in some ways, seeing how jovial and happy-go-lucky and he's laughing and nothing looks too serious. And I guess, yeah, the solution maybe in Chase's mind looks like it's going to be changing teams and changing bikes again. So I guess you go on that, JT, first, but it's just tough seeing someone that's just so talented and has every single thing except just for that maybe mental approach side in the toolkit, doesn't he? So any words on that?
Yeah, I think it probably drives Chase Sexton insane to watch Jett be so lighthearted with things. Not that he was this weekend. This weekend was a heavy weekend, but just on a career level, if you look at how Jett's just disposition is, it's always smiling, always laughing. Like he's the goofy one in every press conference, and I think Chase probably just has to be like, how does this guy act like this? And you can go back and you can remember in the summer of 2023, Chase is just in like purgatory, losing moto after moto, and Jett's like posting pictures of each other, selfies on planes and stuff. And Chase probably wanted to take the phone out of his hand and break it, like just completely opposite ends of the spectrum about how their, I think, just everyday attitudes are about racing. And when the gate drops, it all changes. But it's just crazy the difference. And I only know I know myself. I know how guys I was around. It was really serious. Like it was much more the Cooper Webb on race day dynamic than the Jett side. But it is a crazy thing to watch the contrast between the two. So I don't know. Maybe Chase could do a little bit better if he lightened up a little bit. I could never do that. I don't have any advice for him of how to do that because I certainly couldn't do it. But he really seems like he's carrying the weight of the world around with him at all times.
Yeah, I personally don't know if we all beat to our own different drum, right? And I don't know if having a major change in that perspective would really change anything.
Yep.
I just think that specifically it's going to be around the way he's thinking when his goggles go on finally. That's the final piece of the puzzle when he's in his own world and trying to rewire his thinking there. So, yeah, I hate to just sort of go on and on about it, but it's really, it really is a shame to see it. And I hope that we can see him make some changes. I've already said this to you guys. I don't believe that jumping on a green bike is going to be the change. It isn't going to be the change, that's needed. So it's certainly going to be deeper in the toolbox than that's for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff because obviously you blokes and people like RC have that constructive criticism because you know how good he is and how good he can be. So we'll definitely follow his progress, with interest. And I guess
that's exactly what it is. That's why we're so critical about it, right? And you can hear in RC's voice when he's live on the air, and it's just because that he has so much more to offer as a racer than what it says on paper at this current point,
Like a blessing and a curse, the ability opens you up to the criticism, but it also is just because everyone sees what your talent makes you capable of.
Just to put a bow on this, I guess, but I'd be really interested to hear or get inside the mind of Roger DeCosta on this one and what his thoughts are. That would really intrigue me, that part of it.
A lot of frustration, I would bet. I think just in talking to Roger about it, he's a big fan of Chase's work ethic, and he'll tell you like he's the fittest rider on the starting line. But I think on the mental side, where Roger was such an animal mentally, like he just would annihilate everybody on the track and off it. It has to be brutal for him to watch someone that good not grasp the opportunity in front of him.
Yeah, and I think I spoke to this point again last time. I'm repeating myself really, but he made such inroads with Ryan Dungey in a sense there, and I felt like, he may be able to do something similar with Chase in that sense, because I think there are a lot of question marks if you wind the clock back, that going from the Honda, everyone saw all these small errors with the front end, and everyone was thinking, the cating will be the savior of that. But really, the errors might not be exactly the same in a sense, but the errors are still there. And really, I was wondering if that's something that Roger, may have an influence on, like he did probably. Not saying that Ryan Dungey made those errors, but he certainly was able to assist Ryan. We've all heard Ryan talk about it in the way that he was able to assist him in terms of being mentally strong and being able to achieve his potential, really. And that's what we're talking about, really. If we come down to it, that's 100%. The part that we're not seeing him achieve his potential. So anyway, we'll move exactly on from that, I guess.
Yeah, all right. We'll go on to Tomac now. Really strong showing by ET3. He pretty much was right there for 25 minutes in that second moto with Jett. They both had their sections, like you said, JT. I guess that Moto 2 was really cool seeing those guys battle, contrasting styles. And I guess he'll look to carry that momentum into Hangtown, a place where he's done very well in the past. So it's really cool to see Tomac. I guess he's got that sort of pretty fierce mindset, and he loves the suffering of outdoors, and he clearly puts the work in and just enjoys racing still. And luckily for us, it looks like he'll be around for a fair bit longer. So yeah, he's kind of the main challenger for Jett now, isn't he, JT? And it's going to be fascinating this weekend seeing how they face off against each other.
Yeah, it seems that way. And we're lucky that Tomac is still this capable at this stage of his career. He's an interesting one. I think this weekend will be a good opportunity for him because the heat and the conditions that I mentioned, I think help him. And also, this is a great racetrack for him. He's put in some of his best rides ever. He won the first race of his Pro Motocross career here. He had one of the most impressive wins of any race ever in 2015 at this track. So those types of feelings don't go away. When he arrives at Prairie City Off-Road Park on Friday, he's going to have that same good feeling that every rider gets when you go to a track that you have typically done well at. You just have little pep in your step. You're a little bit more comfortable. And he's also, I believe he's going to know that just on a purely physical, who can suffer the most scale, I think that helps him. And the only person I think he would wonder about in that conversation is Chase. And if Chase isn't there, I think that's a great setup for him because I think he understands what Jett is and what he does well. He's the ultimate race manager. He can go as fast as anyone. He doesn't have to go as fast as anyone. He can manage the situation. But we really haven't seen Jett in the harshest conditions, the hottest days of, in history, what that is. And it doesn't mean he's not going to live up to the expectation, but coming off an injury, we haven't seen it. So anytime there's uncertainty and anytime you're coming back a little sooner than most think you are, the most extreme conditions are going to be the biggest question marks. So for Eli, I think he has a lot of reasons to smile about the setup going into this weekend. So what can he do with that? Can he capitalize on that? Can he find a way to win? Maybe take a little bit out of Jett's confidence, maybe, because I do think Jett respects Tomac above everyone else. You can see in the way he acts towards him, the way he talks to him, the comments he makes to him. Think about his interaction with him at San Diego Supercross. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He should.
Yeah, totally. 100%. Yeah. You just see he doesn't treat Chase and Eli the same. And he just doesn't, right? I don't think he fears Chase at all. But I think he knows what Eli is as he's just an animal, right? Like he can go to a place that not many people can go. Where I think Jett looks at Chase and he goes, yeah, really good rider. But if all things are equal, that guy's not beating me. I truly believe deep down how Jett sees Chase. So I think it's a fascinating setup for Eli because I don't think every round's gonna be that way. As crazy as it sounds, he hasn't been very good at Colorado. He has these rounds where I think Jett can use his finesse and his skills in a way that I think this weekend is going to be more of just a suffer fest. And I think that leans into a little bit more of what Eli's better at.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, to be honest. I really think there's a lot of key points there that JT's made regarding Eli at this venue, that there's no doubt about it. But I wouldn't underestimate the way that Jett would, he plays off that he doesn't know about, certain historical points of the sport and whatnot and this and that. But I think he uses that as fire in his belly for this weekend, to be honest with you, and certainly the heat aspect is going to be a major factor this weekend for all involved. There's no doubt about it. But I really do believe that going from what we saw this past weekend, it's a real question in my mind. Are we ever going to see Jett Lawrence potentially ride his bike as fast as he might be capable of? Have we ever seen that? We don't know that. No one knows that. He got challenged again on the weekend by Eli, but he was able to respond to it in a matter of meters, and within a couple of corners, he responded to that. And so I'm really curious. I think the probably the only factor that would play into it would be whether he can suffer all the way to the finish line. But I don't want to underestimate the guy, because he ticks every other box, and I think questioning that right now, I think I'd be foolish to question that. So I don't know if anything changes this weekend. No, I really don't. I think Eli, he's obviously in great form. He's very, very happy and comfortable on his bike. Super happy and comfortable. We all know that Eli needs to be to go to the places that we see him go in terms of speed and going to that into that zone that he goes into. But I think he's there right now. He's said it publicly too. He said it at the press conference. He said it in separate interviews. So I think in terms of him and his happy place, he's there. So it's going to be, it's going to take something a little extra special, and maybe JT's right when I put it like that, and I think of it like that. Going to Hangtown, where he's absolutely walloped the field before. I was his riding partner at the time when he turned pro, and he won, on pro debut, which was very special in itself. So yeah, it is a cool venue. So there may be something in that, but I'm gonna on the side of, I think that it's going to take something extremely special to get up over Jett, to be honest.
You know what the other side of that coin is Jett is the master of efficiency. And when conditions are at their most extreme, can he find a way to conserve energy where everybody else is going flat out? Like Eli is just like, I'm going to use these conditions to my advantage, and Jett just going around the bumps, resting where he needs to rest, and then they're down to the last 4 laps again, and Jett's still fresh. Like that's the other side of this equation that Jett has been so able to handle so far. So yeah, you make a great point there.
Do you recall, I don't know if you recall this, but I recall it because Cody Cooper was so good that day, but Unadilla James crossed the finish line, threw his bike down, and he kicked the soil like, I got you. I knocked you bastard off at Unadilla. You remember that, JT?
Yeah, I do. Sure I do. Yep.
I don't think that Jett Lawrence is that fond of Hangtown. I would just presume this, right? It didn't end well for him there last year. It was a very challenging day for him when he won his first ever pro championship, right? It was a challenging day for him.
Yep.
I just picture that in my mind. He crosses the finish line at Hangtown this weekend, lays his bike down and kicks the dirt and said, I got you, you bastard. It's kind of the vision that I see for it if it all goes well, because I really do believe you've touched on one point there, is his efficiency to be able to ride the motorcycle so well, and that would then carry over into his physical condition as well. So I think that's a really key point.
I've always been told by everyone around him that there are 2 things that will get the best out of him. And one is people telling him that he can't do something.
Yep.
and 2 is the highest pressure situation that you can find. Those are the 2
Yep.
things that will bring out the very best in him. Complacency is the worst enemy. If he feels like there's nothing to really prove or nothing, nobody cares, everybody expects him to win, you're still going to get a reasonable effort, but he's not going to be that focused. So maybe what you're saying, this is what he needs to bring his best stuff out.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. I genuinely feel about that this weekend. What I want to say there, just regarding Eli, because that's how we started the subject. It's so cool to still have him in the sport, right? It's like fire and ice watching those 2 races, right? And I really appreciate that. You know, as much as I really like probably adore the skill set, riding style of Jett, you know, and how he's able to just be so meticulous with his riding. There's something in watching Eli and the way he just absolutely just pounds the soil and just destroys the motorcycle. And I don't know if you remember this, JT, but during the broadcast on Saturday morning, James started laughing when he, you know, because the sound is such good feedback on the microphones, you know, from the cameras on the trackside, and James just started laughing. Like, he was just absolutely destroying the clutch, and just thing was sitting on about what seemed like 17,000 RPM.
Yeah.
And so it's like fire and ice, and I really appreciate that for the sport right now, and the fact that he's what is he, 31 or 32 years old, and it's really cool to see that he's still in there in the fight, and he's able to do that. And I really appreciate that as a fan for the sport, which is really cool. I mean, I've got a soft spot for Eli. You know, we're good family friends, and I just love the fact that he's still out there doing it. You know, and we're able to still cheer for him, and it sounds like he's going to be around. You know, talking to his dad in recent weeks and months, he's still going to be around for a little bit. So that's going to be, you know, really cool for the sport as well. I mean, he's become that all-American hero as well, right?
Yeah.
You know, like it's which is, you know, that's just part of the sport in America. You know, everyone loves that American hero, and that's really cool as well.
Yeah, to your point about, you know, Eli's style, and yeah, James did a great job of kind of explaining why the bikes sound that way, the difference in riding styles. He just, yeah, for the average person who hasn't ever raced to understand, like, why is one guy seem like he's going crazy and so loud and the other guy's not, and they're going the same speed, you know, like I thought he did a great job with that. But I would tell anybody listening, go back to Charlotte SMX this past year, and there's a video. I don't know, man. It's YouTube or social media somewhere. You'd be able to find it though. I'll try to find it. But it was a lap of Eli on press day on Friday. I swear he never let off the whole track. Just like the only thing he did to slow himself down was pulling the clutch a few times the entire way around. It was it was the perfect quintessential Eli at his best type moment. And it's just the contrast between Jett's riding style and Eli's is what should be like in some sort of educational book to show the differences. And, you know, I think clearly Jett's is more efficient, but not to say Eli's is wrong. I just think it's much more challenging to do it the way that Eli does it.
He just modulates the power with the clutch, right? That's essentially what he's doing. And it's certainly not the way that I would teach or coach someone to ride. But what's fascinating about it is that then the meeting point, right? So you talk about that SMX track, which is, you know, largely a supercross track environment. And then what you had at Parla, and are quite, you know, and scale, they're very, very different tracks in terms of, you know, riding a very similar motorcycle in a sense, but he's still able to utilize it to its fullest potential. And I think, it's just a real appreciation for him to ride a motorcycle around a track like that and just, you know, just soak it in. Just to one point there, James is so good at analyzing that stuff and delivering it to the viewer, because I think you just made the reference point there to the average fan. Well, even for the most hardcore fan, it's cool to hear him analyze that. And I really do think that brings something really, really special to the broadcast, him being able to, analyze that and articulate it to the fans.
Yeah, it's super
Yep.
awesome to see the whole package of the broadcast and to bring in that knowledge because, like you blokes, you articulate yourselves really well and some of the best racers, some of the best coaches in any sport. It's ex-players have issues, because obviously one, they're trying to teach people that aren't on their level and it can be frustrating and they might not have the delivery, the patience, the words to, make people achieve what they want to make them achieve. So really cool stuff. I know you got to jump off in a bit, JT, but we'll touch on Prado. Obviously disappointed. He admitted you guys are probably expecting more, but on the other hand, BT, you spoke, you didn't really believe the hype a couple of weeks ago. You didn't see it. You thought he would struggle quite severely, and he kind of did. It probably wasn't as competitive as he wanted to be, or people would have thought. New bike, new series, all that stuff. But yeah, getting passed by Jason Anderson and dropped in the second moto wasn't the best look. How does he go at Hangtown, JT? Probably be more of the same, I'd imagine. He's going to suffer a lot in that heat too.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I think most did. I certainly did. Expected more from him last weekend, and that's not to say I expected him to win the race because I did not. New bike, new mechanic, new tire brand, new track, new series, new one-day format, new everything. Literally knew everything. To think he was going to come win the race, I don't think is fair. Uh, but in the same breath, I would say to be passed by Jason Anderson and to be hounded for the entire second moto by Cooper Webb is also not what I expected. Like that is subpar for the Jorge Prado I've been watching for several years now. So I think a lot of people have kind of been like, oh, it's I think Steve Mathis and other people are like, it's kind of what I thought. I'm like, but why would you ever think you thought that Jason Anderson not racing since before Seattle, not typically an outdoor specialist, and Cooper Webb, who hasn't really practiced motocross at all, you thought that that's who he'd be racing with at his first national? That really? Like, that's what you thought?
That's such a
Okay.
great, that's such a great way to analyze it, actually. Yeah.
So yeah, it's not the end of the world, right? He knows he needs to be better. It's not like it's a big mystery as to what the expectation is. I just don't for everyone, that's in the EU right now and MXGP fans that think that Hangtown is going to be the bounce back round. I am not looking for that yet because I think the conditions are going to be really difficult for him. 102 or 40 degrees Celsius with humidity is historically has not been great for him anyway. And I just think coupled with all of the other challenges he has is just not the ideal scenario going in. So for him, if I was him, I would just want some metric of improvement, whether it's, hey, we qualified better today, or hey, we figured the starts out today, or I could see the leaders until the halfway, like some sort of improvement. So you leave Hangtown with a better feeling than you left Fox Raceway because I just don't think it's the round to be like, we're going to figure it out. We're going to be in the fight today. I do think, High Point, when we move east, the conditions will be better. The weather will be a little bit more tolerable. I think he can start making inroads to where he wants to be. I just think this weekend, it's just going to require patience on everybody's part, and finding small victories within the weekend is really what this Saturday should be about. Not 2 Saturdays from now or 3 Saturdays from now. You can start to expand the upside. I just think this weekend's going to be a tough one.
I don't really have anything to add to that. It's going to be a slow burn. JT's bang on the money. It's going to be a slow burn. It's I think the way he analysed it, certainly I didn't see, Jason Anderson coming back and being able to battle with him. Yeah, I think that's a great point, but it's going to take him some time. It's certainly going out to these racetracks first and foremost, and only having.
I want to defend Jorge here because I don't think that many people understand what that race would look like if it was at St. John or Ernay and Cooper Webb went out there and Jason Anderson went out there and Jorge Prado went out there on Saturday. I don't think they realize what that would look like versus what we saw this past Saturday. It would just be a very different thing. And he's going to get back to that. It's not like he forgot how to ride. I just think being patient and not panicking is not going to help anything. They just need to methodically figure out, okay, what's holding us back. Start with the qualifying lap. You know, he needs to qualify well to get his confidence up, and
Well,
then he needs to
I'll
get really
cut
good
you off
starts.
there. I'll
Yeah,
cut
go
you
ahead.
off there. He wasted time in that second session when he went out there. He was the last to leave the gate, and
Yep.
he dawdled around the track. Like that's the wrong approach to start with. You know, I was sitting here, or not here, but wherever I was watching it live, and I said to my boys, he's wasting time. He needs to be the first person off the start gate, maximizing that track time. That's the first. I don't want to say mistake,
right.
but certainly something to. You talked about this metric for next weekend. We'll add that to the metric. There's no doubt
Yep.
about it. And I think using that word metric for next weekend and going forward, because he isn't going to solve that metric in 7 days' time. It's going to be over, the course of the summer. And again, I think one thing we've got to take into context here, he's racing some very, very high level operators here. We're talking about some of the best in the business, and although he is, but in his own zone, if they were racing him, it's a different story, like you just pointed out. But he's not. He's in their backyard now, right? So
Yep.
I think that's one thing that we're just going to have to sort of study and look for those small gains. Do his starts come back similar or somewhere in the zone of what he does in his own backyard? Does he maximize his track time? Because that that's one of the biggest things that I said last time we spoke is for Jorge and for someone like Cole Davies, just that track time against these great riders that have had so much experience on these tracks already. So that's another part there. And certainly, the heat isn't going to be easy. And when you come from Europe, I can attest to this, man. You come to and you go to an event like what you're going to go to at Hangtown this weekend, it's like, holy moly, what are we doing racing dirt bikes right now? It seems insane.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a huge factor for him. And JT is bang on the money. It's not his strongest suit, that part either. Although he's from Spain, it's certainly not his strongest suit. So yeah, it's just going to be a slow burn. That's all there is to it. You don't go to a new country, a new series on a new bike, new suspension, new tires, new mechanic. Everything's new. Yeah, it's just not going to happen like some people might have thought. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the one, if I was him and I was going to this weekend, you make a great point about taking off because you need every lap possible. And I also think you just need to kind of start fast. You don't have any familiarity, so you need to get out front with the guys that know the track, absorb any of their pace whenever you can, right? That also means on the start of the races, he's one of the best starters we've ever seen historically. So he races well from the front and he needs to see the pace. He needs to get up there with Hunter and Jett and Eli, see what the pace is, see the lines they're choosing. Because frankly, when he's in 7th and 8th and 9th, he's seeing the lines that Webb and these guys are choosing. They're not going the pace he wants to be going. So he doesn't know the track. He's never raced the track. So it's so easy to fall into and absorb the pace of those around you because that's all you see. You don't have all of this. Like if he went to a track he's raced 10 MXGPs on, he would know, okay, these are the lines, it's the pace, this is kind of how I should be feeling. This track, he has none of that data to fall back on. So he's judging himself by who he's around, and it's really easy to just fall into their pace versus whatever pace he may be capable of if he was up there at the beginning. So it starts with the start, which, sounds super cliche, but for what he does well, I think he's the most comfortable racing from the front. And if he has to work backwards, okay, but he needs to be up there with those he wants to finish with. He's just never going to catch them. Like he's not going to start 12th and move forward. He's never really done that in his whole career. So to think on tracks he's never raced on, it's almost impossible to think he would do it now.
No, certainly racing from an average start position forward is not a strength of his whatsoever. There's no doubt about that. So, yeah, I think you're bang on there. He's going to have to actually find and feel what that feels like on those racetracks, and each and every one of them is new to him. So he needs to be out there in amongst that, and like you said, getting a feeling for what that feels like. It's not like, he used to live in Longmore, right? So it's not like going around the Longmore and going, well, these guys, what are they mucking around at? I need to be going 2 seconds a lap faster. He doesn't know what that feels like on those certain, in that environment that you're pertaining to, JT. So, that's bang on.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And as we wrap this one up, JT, I know you got to head off as well, but just give us any final thoughts ahead of Hangtown. Obviously, you're probably doing your own prep, dealing with the heat, mate. It's going to be pretty brutal for you. And obviously, you can follow up BT. You've won there in the past, keys to success. So you go first, JT, then BT you can follow.
Yeah, I think it's a track that it's not all that difficult to learn. It's honestly, you go to kind of the top of the hill and come down the hill. It's not that challenging of a like trying to remember where you are type thing. The conditions are going to be just brutal for these guys. Like who can manage the heat, who can recover in between motos, who can get their core body temperature down. Like those are we haven't faced anything like that in this series since 2022. Like we've had hot days, sure, but not extreme, not where they're talking about shortening the motos this weekend because it's going to be so difficult. So, that's going to be the challenge to me. I would, if you're not already making efforts to get there here on Wednesday as we record this, you're already behind. You're already chasing the hydration and all the things that you're going to face on the weekend. So, that's what all I would be thinking about is I need to be my best self on Saturday. Like I don't care about riding on Wednesday. I don't care about any of that. If I'm not 100% strength on Saturday, then we've lost the plot already. And just the only thing I would touch on 250 is I think Deegan's going to smash everybody into a million pieces this weekend. Fitness wise, I watched him when he took his helmet off this weekend. He didn't look like he had even ridden. The effort level for the second half of the race seemed like zero for him. And when you incorporate the conditions into this weekend, and like, I know those 250 guys are fit, but they're not as fit as they probably think they are. They're going to learn about fitness this weekend. And I think Deegan's going to embarrass some people this weekend. I really do.
Okay, wait on. Before you jump off, JT, I don't really have anything to add on the Hangtown thing and all the you've hit that nail right on the head. What you saw from Haiden this past weekend, do you think there are a couple of points that I want you to think about? What you've seen this past weekend, do you think he has a lot more in the tank? And if you compare him in 12 months' time, is he capable of putting himself on that podium or in amongst that battle of Jett and Eli?
Right now, no. If he continues to progress, it's not impossible. But I think right now he would be in that fight with Hunter and the champions that came before him. I just think it's such a rare thing where Jett and Eli were this past weekend. I mean, they put 32 seconds into Hunter and AP and the rest. They put a full minute into Prado. I just don't think he's ready for that yet. I don't think, and to be fair, I don't think he, should be, right? The expectation is not for him to be there quite yet. But he is on the right trajectory. If you look at where he was last year, his racecraft, his patience level, just all the little nuance things with racing, he's taken a really big step forward from last year to this year. But I still think he has another big step to take if he wants to immediately challenge at the very, very top.
Yeah, it's a very, very hard thing to do, is to step straight into the premier class and challenge at that level. But you'd have to think in his mind that's what he would want to do. Like that's what I say they, him and his father and in the inner circle there would be preparing, for. And I know they are, and we all know that. But I certainly think that he's going to have to raise his level this year from what certainly it was a dominant performance. He met all the expectations of what we expect for right here, right now. There's no doubt about that. But
yep.
I expect him to do that. Like he should win almost every round and near every moto. But I'm already thinking, I want to see him in the Premier class, is what I'm thinking towards. Just because I think that he's going to be ready for that next year in terms of moving to that class. But what's he capable of? And I think that's going to be obviously the most talked about point for next season, and him shifting into the Premier class and what he's going to be capable of right out of the blocks. Can he be competitive at that highest level in that class? So just wanted to try and get something out of you before you jumped off, mate.
Yeah, no, I think he's on his way. If he didn't take a big step forward, I would say he's got a lot of work to do. But what I saw last weekend is the right improvement trajectory to get there. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I was interesting hearing some of his comments in the press conference about how he just managed to race. That type of stuff is certainly something new, to his weaponry, and certainly something that probably needed to be added. So you are right. He's starting to tick all of the boxes in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, JT, thanks for your time, mate. Been another ripper chat. I don't know if you want to keep going a little bit longer, Ben. We can chop up a few more topics if you like. But yeah, cheers again, JT. We look forward to catching up next week, and all the best for the weekend in the heat, mate.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next week.
No worries. Have a good one.
See you guys.
All right, BT. Yeah, we sort of barely got through about 5 blokes there just because the conversations with you two blokes were so awesome there. It was really great to hear your insight. We probably, spent a lot of time on Chase there, a lot of time on Jett, but obviously it needs to be covered. And when you guys both have such excellent opinions, it makes for great listening. So, yeah, I guess another topic I didn't even get to talk to JT about was that scoop tie. Obviously, the starts being so important. Would have you run that? What's your take on it?
I don't want to hear about it. It's round, it's black, it's got different knobs on it. Just get on with it. I'm sick of hearing about scoop this, scoop that. Just go out and go racing. I've actually ridden on the scoop a lot. Just because when you ride, I'm pretty fair weathered. So I ride in the cooler months in New Zealand. I don't get out in the heat in New Zealand, and on softer tracks, and so I run it everywhere that I ride pretty much, just because of the conditions that I ride in. Yeah, it's probably, if you're not running it, you're probably at a disadvantage now. So just get on with it and use it, and let's just stop talking about this whole scoop thing. It's going on for too long now.
Yeah, mate, it's good to hear your take on it for sure. And another man, I guess we mentioned him briefly in passing, is Hunter. Obviously, it's hard for him in some ways to get the credit he deserves when there's so much else going on and so many other riders taking the headlines. But really impressive again. The bloke had 25 minutes for Chase every moto last year, pretty much. Showed his stuff. He's coming back from an injury. Made that little mistake at the end of the second moto, and AP got him. But shoulder's not there, bike's not there. Super impressive to get it on the podium, isn't it, mate? So he definitely deserves the credit that comes his way, and he doesn't get enough of it.
Yeah, 100%. He doesn't get enough of it. Yeah, bang on there. There's no doubt that he's going to assert himself right in that, the top 3-4 there. I think AP was probably a little bit more competitive than I expected, and so I know we probably didn't see a lot of what Hunter was doing on track, in terms of, camera wise, but he certainly showed, what he's capable of. I did expect him to be in that conversation there where he was. I didn't think he wouldn't, that he wouldn't be. Like you said, he ran Chase's speed and competed with for that championship last year in the Premier class at his first go. So as long as he was healthy and had the bike time, and by all accounts they had that time, like I talked about with Jett, then I had no reason to think that he wouldn't be there. And he's technically very good. He's fit. He's got a great team behind it. So he had everything there ready to return and be at that level again. So not a surprise to me whatsoever, to be honest with you. And I don't know if he's going to be able to, to chop 30 seconds out of that is going to be hard. Like what I can't stress enough to the, you know, those that are listening, you know, what you're seeing, you know, that was one, you know, the speed that those two are racing at the front that's a race for the history books, you know, and if we continue to see that all summer long, it's going to be very hard for anyone else to get themselves in that conversation, you know. So I think that, you know, Hunter will definitely go back to work, and you know, they'll need more time on that bike to improve it, and he'll benefit from that because Hunter's you know, he likes to have good feeling and know what he's got underneath him. He doesn't like to ride on the edge. You know, that's bitten him once too many times in his past, and he has learned from that. You know, you've got to give credit to riders. You know, we you know, I'm so critical of Chase. You give credit to Hunter and how he's able to be a lot more accurate, you know, with his riding in these days, and not put himself in harm's way. And he certainly, you know, will improve that motorcycle for him over the coming weeks, you know, with the time that he gets on it in a race condition, and be able to go back to the drawing board during the weekdays and improve it. So I expect he will improve, but it'll be interesting to see if he can put himself any closer to Jett and Eli. I'm sort of on the fence about, you know, it's a significant step to make.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And obviously, you probably put Justin Cooper in a similar bracket. He's got that precise approach, methodical. You know, he builds into, you know, things. He doesn't just instantly have the raw speed on whatever class he's in. He sort of takes time to get to the battle. And you can see when he gets the starts, Justin Cooper, just how good he is. But when he misses that jump, a bit like Prado, so hard to battle through the field, and he's not particularly used to it or accomplished at that skill set. So, you know, if you get yourself in those tough situations, no matter what class you're racing, it's hard to get through 10 blokes. And he found that on the weekend. But do you also see Parla as a bit of an outlier? Because usually there's guys that are particularly excellent on there. It's not many guys' favourite track. You hear that, you know, there's bigger margins of winning and losing at Parla compared to some others. Do you see it like that? Or is that just like a justification in the mind to start fresh for the next week?
Just to go back on that comment you made about Justin Cooper, I definitely see him and Hunter having some good ding dongs this summer. That's for sure. You know, I think that you know, he's probably not in that conversation of Jett and Eli just yet either. And I think that we're bound to see some pretty epic battles for him and Hunter and AP, and you know, just that I think that group that will be pretty close on speed this summer. So I look forward to that. It'll be interesting watching, that's for sure. In regards to Parla, I just don't know if it's iconic ground of US Pro Motocross, if I'm honest. You know, like we're never going to see it, but it belongs at Glen Helen. You know, I just don't know about it's just that long, stretched out, you know, looks like a hot dog style venue, and they're sort of just, you know, up and down it, and I don't know, nothing jumps out at me from Parla in terms of actually, you know, I'm not sort of waiting on bated breath to see it on Saturday morning type of thing, you know. And I don't think, from what I hear, many of the riders are either, if you hear what they say in the post press conferences and whatnot and interviews. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of it. I've ridden it, you know, quite a bit for testing purposes and practicing, and you know, it's a fun track at those times, you know, Monday to Friday. But I'm not so sure about a race track. Certainly not for around a pro motocross. But I don't think that, you know, it's going to be here for a long. It's been there for a long time now, since 2010. I think it's been there on the calendar now. So it's probably not going away either. So I just feel like it doesn't have, you know, it doesn't have that real essence about a pro motocross round to me. I don't know, the way it forms up, maybe doesn't have anything classic about it. You know, I think that's what, you know, as fans, we all, you know, wait for each round, you know, all the other 10 rounds, you know, that it has something that's pretty iconic about the American Motocross Championship, you know, because most of the rounds, for the most part, have been on the calendar since well before I was born, and they are, to me, just so iconic, and I just don't have that same feeling view on Parla, and I think that comes through in the riders' comments as well, with the way the track sort of races and whatnot. So yeah, neither here nor there for me, Parla, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't hear a lot of positive comments about the track, and some people don't necessarily like the event as well. Just, the fans are sort of dwindling a little bit. Obviously, it's still the opener and there's a lot of fanfare about it, but it's probably not what it used to be in some ways. Do you feel that too?
Yeah, it sounds like that. I mean, if I just speak from a rider's point of view, it looks like it just sort of funnels in a lot, and they have to sort of make these. No, I don't know how you say, the designs where it comes along, it sort of turns 90, goes to another 90 section and back out to the same lane that was on, in a sense. It doesn't look to me like it sort of races that well in that sense. So I feel like maybe it could be redesigned. I don't know who does the actual race or the pro national design. It certainly needs an iconic jump. I heard Haiden speak about that in the press conference. It doesn't have an iconic jump. That's one thing that's just part and parcel with American motocross, right? You've got to have a Buddha in there somewhere. Doesn't have that. So yeah, I guess that's why you hear the comments that you hear. And you certainly don't hear that from Redbud, do you? But I guess you've got to have 11 rounds and they're all different and whatnot. But I certainly look forward to the ones that are to come in the calendar, that's for sure. I'm certainly happy that we start there and as a fan and don't finish there, that's for sure.
Yeah, mate, are you going to get over 20 rounds, or are you flat out with the young fellas racing and stuff in Europe?
No, I'm flat out. Yeah, no, that's not happening this year. I'll be watching it from the couch and enjoying what we have to do. It's pretty cool. I know I've touched on that a few times, but I really think that, like, from a viewing perspective, it's just never been better in my opinion. And I guess like from what you hear, the what's the broadcast partner? What's the name of it?
NBC.
NBC. That it sounds like they've signed on again for a certain figure and certain amount of time. So that there's only going to be even more investment in it now, and if they're seeing that the necessity to invest in the sport like they are, then the numbers must be there, which is really cool to hear. So hopefully that trickles down to the riders, and the riders see a bit of that as well.
Yeah, mate, that could be a topic.
They're the clowns in the circus, and without the clowns in the circus, you ain't got no show. So I hope that trickles down to them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a pretty hot topic in MXGP, which you could do a probably whole podcast on that, mate, couldn't we?
Yeah, I probably need to wait a few years on that until I'm not here in the position I am before I start making those type of comments. No comment's a better comment, probably.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. We'll get back to the racing, and I guess we touched on Deegan. You had a good chat with JT about it, but yeah, flex the muscles. Do you see anyone being able to beat him? Obviously, Shimoda looked really great, started well, shows what he can do. Hymas and Vial had points in both races where they looked really excellent. Obviously, Hymas could have been challenged for the win if he hadn't tipped over. It's hard to see Deegan, in those last 10 minutes, he really comes into his own, and the fitness and the drive and the desire to win just sort of takes over. He's like a movable force at the end there. So do you see anyone taking an overall off him, mate? Maybe a moto win for a Vial or a Hymas or someone like that, but it's going to be pretty challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't. The way I would put it is he's probably going to lose more than they are going to win the race, if that makes sense, right? I think Chance has probably got the best shot. He should have the best shot. Like if we look back to last year and the pace that he showed, and certainly the skills that he possesses on the bike, there's definitely no doubt that being in the shadow of the Lawrences there, he's absorbing that. So I would expect that he's probably got the best shot at stealing some points off Haiden, but for the most part it would be Haiden losing. Bad start, making an error potentially, but for a title run, I don't think there's anyone in the league right now that has got the ability to give him a title run. And I think there's a couple of parts to that. You look at that, you talked about the word that I would put on it to, I guess, round off all of the words you used would just be the grit. When it comes down to it, that's one thing that we've seen time and time again from Haiden, is just the grit that he has to down the stretch in motos. whether it be in a battle or whether when his back's against the wall. He has that grip, and I don't know if I see anyone else really on the gate, that has that, that grip in them, when it really comes down to it. Obviously, Chance made that mistake, which was a shame on his behalf and probably would have set the race up to be quite a bit better from a fan's perspective, to be honest. I don't think that he would have probably had what it took on that day to win, but certainly he's still he's a bit of a slow burn as well, Chase. He's coming off the back of that injury, and he certainly didn't perform to the level that I thought he would in Supercross. So there's still more to come, and there was glimpses of it at Parla, and so there certainly will be the odd moto victory. There's no doubt about it to come from him. It ain't coming from Joe, in my opinion. I don't think so. Levi was pretty disappointing. I don't even know where he featured. He obviously had a mechanical issue in one of the races, motos. Don't know what happened in the other, but as a whole, no, there's really it's Deegan's championship to lose, and I think everyone knows that, really.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, isn't it? And you look at someone like Vial, and they openly say, "I want to win this title," and he's obviously done what he's done in MX2, got those couple of world titles, got a couple of Supercross titles, and on the face of things, you'd think he'd be up there with Deegan, but Deegan's just got that raw speed. Vial's more of a calculated, precise rider. Doesn't really make mistakes, and he's always at pretty much every gate drop, which is a testament to his consistency and his durability and his sort of, I don't know, not cautious riding, but he's measured, isn't he? So I guess it's harder for those guys. They really have to get out of their comfort zone, and Deegan's just the most comfortable at being uncomfortable, isn't he, mate? So it's just such a tough competitor to get the edge on. And you look at when Deegan vacates that class, it's going to be anyone's game, isn't it? It's going to be super good. Say next year, it's going to be absolutely wild, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like, I think, go back to what I sort of proposed to JT earlier in regards to him moving up. And look, just to, I guess, finish off what you're saying, in that class right here, right now, I think he's got the measure of them. He knows that. I think his competition probably deep down know it. Like, you made mention of someone like Vial. He has the qualities there, but it's just not at the same level, I believe. That's what we're seeing, similar. Well, he has the same qualities, but it's just not at the same level of what Haiden, is showcasing to us. And that's why I'm really intrigued would be the best way to put it, in terms of in 12 months' time, is Haiden capable of, putting himself in that same conversation as Jett and Eli? I'm not saying, that Eli's going to be there at that same point next year, or there might be someone, Prado might be in there. But what I mean by that is, you've got Jett racing like he does, with that methodical, technical ability, and the way that he is able to really, be calculated around the course. You've got Eli, who's just an absolute, animal out there, and just pounding the bike and the track around. And then you've got someone like Haiden, who's obviously new age, and in a sense, he's on a similar riding style to Eli in a sense, but then he possesses that sort of that mental aspect of just grit and determination that is probably in between Jett and Eli, and I think that's pretty mouthwatering, aspect to look at. So interested to see. I guess I have always been of the opinion that it's going to take someone like Haiden to be to have a better technical base. But then when you see Eli out there, it's very different in a sense to what Eli rides. But maybe just the noise of how Eli gets around the track overshadows the technical ability in a sense. So, yeah. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see in 12 months' time, that's for sure. I think what I was trying to propose to JT as well is Haiden does need that time this year of really putting, logging those laps and putting himself in that winning position, And that's why I was interested to see that he didn't just really dominate with huge margins as well. That was for me probably an interesting point that I took away from the weekend for him. And that was like post race in the interviews. That was something that he really made a point of saying, like that's something that I'm trying to learn, that it's not about the race margin of victory that I win by every time I'm out there. So certainly some definitely learning going on in the background there, as the season goes along for sure. But on the flip side, you're going to want to see some dominating victories as well, because really that's going to then testify his speed, really, which at the end of the day, speed's the trump card, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be so good to follow the trajectory there and just the approach and how it all plays out. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Obviously, I wanted to get your take on the PC lads. Obviously, Mitch Well, no rider in the top five, coming off Seth losing that Supercross title in heartbreaking fashion. Not the weekend they wanted. You look, Marchbanks had good speed, but just, getting bad starts. He's a big man on that 250. And yeah, Marchbanks 6th, Hammaker 7th, Masterpool 10th, Drew Adams 11th. That's pretty solid for him. Such a young rider just stepping up to the pro ranks, and obviously Levi Kitchen back in 16th. But yeah, Mitch will be scratching the head a little bit, won't he, mate? He won't be happy.
Nah, no, certainly not. I expected more from Drew Adams, to be honest with you.
Very talented.
I put him in the same, same box as Cole. We've seen what Cole. Unfortunately, Drew's been injured early this year, but I put him in that same category as Cole and what we've seen from Cole and Supercross. And you'd have to think that, I would think that Drew has probably more potential in the great outdoors than he did within Supercross. Whereas it's easy for me to say this, but I knew that Cole had that more potential indoors, than what Drew did. So yeah, the 11th for me, I'm sure that'll get better. He's certainly in the right environment, with Lawrence's as well, and I'm sure he'll be a sponge and absorb a lot there. But certainly 11th is a little slower start than I would have expected from him. The Levi Kitchen I'm not so sure about Masterpool and those other guys that are on PC. They'll have some flashes, I'm sure. Masterpool did last year, as we saw, but Kitchen, he's the one that really needs to fire. He didn't fire on the weekend. I didn't see him on the screen other than when he was, I think, pushing his bike back. So he's the one that needs to really do a bit of homework and want to see something from him this weekend. And we have seen it. I mean, this is not too dissimilar to what we've seen from him. At times it'll just be brilliance and he'll be fighting to win, and other times he doesn't even show on paper in the black and white. So yeah, he's the one that really needs to start firing, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touched on Cole there. Have you got a timeline on his return from injury and when we'll see him back out there, mate? Because he'll definitely be a great addition to the series too. Because it's a strange dynamic with Star, because they've kind of got Deegan winning, and then there's sort of, your Mosemans, your Thrashers, Bennick's out too, Pierce Brand's out. So it's either
other riders.
Yeah,
a plethora of other riders filling up the gate.
But yeah, so yeah,
no,
thoughts on that?
I don't know. Cole is actually at home at the moment.
Yeah.
Just probably chopping down on Whitaker's.
How good are
they? Sorrows and chocolate, to be honest with you. So, yeah, man, I'd love for some Whitakers right now, to be honest. Anyway, yeah, I don't know, and I really sort of we haven't gone in depth in anything of late. It's just been a lot more lighthearted talk, and the only thing I will say is he won't be rushing back, and that's the biggest part for him now, is to, he's put his stock at such a high level. There's no need for him to rush back. The only thing that he will miss out on, but he'll just have to make up for that, and at a later stage, is just time on those US outdoor tracks. Very similar to what we're talking about for Prado, really, and no different for Cole. So, although he does tell me that he's got some, I don't know, some game thing that he says is so real life, like that it's unbelievable. So I said, yeah, good on you, mate. And that didn't exist when I was coming up through the US outdoor rounds. But yeah, that will be the biggest loss for him. Other than that, I don't see us sweating too much whatsoever. I think the biggest focus needs to turn to SMX. He needs to come out ready to fight Haiden for that championship, and I'm already looking forward to it. I've already been thinking about that for him, to be honest.
Yeah, it's going to be good, mate. Obviously, it was a big season for him in Supercross, and it's, sometimes it is good to have a breather, refresh, recalibrate, get the focus right, and then get back to work just really fresh, hungry, ready to go. So it'd be great to see him back out there, mate. And a couple more topics before we let you go, mate, because you've had a massive day. Just your opinion on Chad Reed taking the consultancy role at Club MX. That's pretty cool. Obviously, he's moved there. That program is really making strides. Obviously, Anderson, Prado, so many guys are out there. As a facility as well, it's just top notch, isn't it? It's got everything you need for youngsters to want to become, really elite riders. The framework's excellent. So just your talk on Reed and also Club MX as a facility.
Yeah, I don't really know too much about that role that you're speaking of. Yeah, what I will say though is that more to race to the race team or to the facility or just as a whole?
Seems to be more just a bit of everything, but probably more facility based, I guess, at the actual training of the riders during the week, isn't it? So it's interesting to learn more.
I think personally, like where his strength would lie, from what I know of Chad, would be with their race team, and I do believe he's had like a really good ability in his time with setting up the bike and the strategy of racing, and I think that he could really help that team's come a long way with the limited resources and where they punch well above their weight, I would say. So if you add Chad into that conversation, for them as a team, I think he could add a lot of value there for their race team. I think if you talk about their whole facility and business that they have going on there, I think it looked from afar, it looks incredible to the point that I want to visit there. I've talked to Justin Brayton about, when timing's right and I'm in the country, I do want to go and visit it with him and have a look at it, for my boys potentially in the future, and just probably the thing that stands out to me is the area that it's set in, and that is it North Carolina? So I don't know, somewhere in the Carolinas there, and looks like a really nice part of the country to be based in as well. So I just think it seems like it has a lot going for it, and I feel like every other day recently there's been something going on there that's some type of a news story and so it's just like it seems to continually have this momentum recently, and good on them. Clearly they're running a successful business there. I don't know if it's the type of business that I personally like. Certainly for kids, I just don't. I don't know if I'm on board with this whole leave home type of scenario and go and be based at these facilities. I don't know if I'm on board with that fully. I guess I'm not. I sit on the fence about that personally, but in terms of what it is as a facility for motocross riders, it seems incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a good topic, that facilities, and you look at the pro level ones like the Baker's Factory, what they're doing at Star, and training and coaching in the sports, something a lot about. And do you find that they're obviously not for everyone, those sort of programs, but they do sort of give you that test day in, day out? It's a battle every day, how you cope with challenges, facing adversity, not being the top dog every day. There's benefits and drawbacks, obviously. Just say your take on that, mate. You've been seen, done it all, so your take on those as well.
Yeah, personally, it wouldn't be for me. There's no doubt about that. It wouldn't be for every pro out there, that's for sure. And I like to, I guess, if I look at the reasons why, is I like to be in my own environment. I guess I came up through that era where I didn't want everyone seeing what I did and what we were doing in the weekdays and how hard I was working, because I felt like that was an advantage, that you took into the weekend. But then I completely, I feel like I'm pretty pragmatic with these type of things, and if I look at Cole, as an example, we really held off putting him into the star environment. His father, Wayne, and I, we talked about it a lot, along with Will Hahn. And, he was the reason why he was with Will. This give you a good insight into, some of the planning and the planning and being so really strategic for Cole was that we didn't feel that type of environment where that dog eat dog Monday to Friday we thought that it would just eat him up, really. And so we spoke a lot about that. And I guess to the point of what you're asking there, it's not for everyone. And the timing of that is really critical for a young rider, I feel. Like how often have we seen, just as an example for Star, young amateur riders come into that program and then you don't even hear that they're gone from there. You just one day question, where is that person? That they don't seem to exist anymore as a racer, So for Cole, as specifically, I think that you're really seeing. It's easy to say this right now, but the timing of him going into that program, that he had really established himself in that amateur to pro crossover that he was at the midpoint of last year when he finished the Essex Futures, and he was at a level physically and mentally where he could go into that environment in that dog eat dog scenario, and it actually benefited him. It wasn't a negative to him in a sense. And yeah, certainly a tough environment for those young riders to be in. And I think you've really got to manage that, and otherwise you can see how it would really just basically chew you up and spit you out. I can see that happening, and we've seen that happen now quite a number of times within that specific scenario there. So yeah, I mean, as a whole, I think for the established pros is probably a lot that a lot of riders would get out of it. But there's, a few riders that is probably, the other riders are getting that benefit from them specifically, and they're giving away, I guess, some of their IP in a sense, and if you put it like that. So, yeah, like I said to you before, we were talking about the club, and then we started talking about, other facilities. I guess from my perspective, it's not for everyone, that's for sure. And I certainly will be interested to go through that potentially with my boys and see if it's something that, would last for an entire career. I don't know if that battling riders day in, day out, Monday to Friday, and then having to turn around and do that again on a weekend, if that's something that you could sustain for an entire career. It's hard to say. No one's done that yet, have they? This is a new era in that sense. So whether that's sustainable. And saying that, Cooper Webb's gone back into that at his age, so, he's probably, that might have helped him in a sense at his age, to level up in a way. So interesting topic. I don't think we really know the answer. That needs more water under that bridge, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it, mate? Obviously, yeah, like you said, so many dudes have been chewed up and spat out. And you look at the Lawrence sort of dog pound they've got going on, probably more of a selective group of guys they have, only limited spots there. It's just they're doing their own work with the people that they know and trust. And I guess, it can lead to burnout, like you said. And I suppose, yeah, exposing secrets and, different mentalities and approaches. And I guess you look at what Tomac does. He has the freedom to do what he wants back home, and that's probably helped his longevity as well because you're not so jaded. And I guess having that injury layoff helped in his case too. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. There's different approaches and they work different ways. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of dudes that have gone there. Just the sheer volume of blokes there, and you barely hear about them anymore. And they're off the map in moto, aren't they? So it's a pretty tough balance for not just kids, but like you said, parents to manage as well.
Yeah, a couple of points to touch on there is one, the jaded part that you made comment of for Eli. So he wouldn't be as jaded mentally,
Mm.
physically it would be no different in a sense, but the jaded mentally because you're having to just battle, and it feels like a race environment in a sense, which, like I said, at times this probably does bring benefit, but certainly that would certainly add into to being jaded, that's for sure. And then I've drawn a mind blank here right now, but you've made a point there. Oh, about Lawrence's place,
Yeah.
and really interesting. Dean Wilson, we were just listening. You listen to a lot of podcasts when you're driving around Europe. There's a lot of time available for listening, and we listened to Dean's one today, and he just made a mention how they don't drop a gate there, right? So there's a really good balance there by the sound of it. And I don't know if it's by design, but you don't hear a lot out of there, nor do you see a lot of social media. I wouldn't think there is rules, but I would say there's an unwritten rule with Dazzy potentially. I'm just speculating, but you don't hear a lot out of there. But it was interesting to hear what Dino said, and it's not super strict in that sense where, hey, we're dropping the gate. It has to work like that at start. I know because there's so many riders. You're just like, right, 9:05, the gate's dropping. Make sure you've done your sighting lap. That's how it works. But it has to because there's so many riders involved in that program. Whereas it doesn't sound like it's at the same level of that racing cutthroat environment, at with Lawrence's, which is interesting because I feel like there's probably a bit of balance in it. If you look at it through the lens I'm looking at, you're probably looking at more, well, firstly, a lesser number of riders, but certainly the quality of focus per rider and what are you actually achieving today. Like, I guess that's for someone like me, I would be looking at it through the lens of, what are you doing to better yourself? Not just, hey, you got to beat that guy today. How are you going to better yourself this week? What do you need to achieve to be a better rider? So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. Like I said, it's a new era in a sense. Certainly at a pro level, it's a new era. That's definite. I guess the amateur scene for it's been around for a while, and that part I just wholeheartedly disagree with. I'm not gonna make any bones about that whatsoever. I just don't agree with it whatsoever. But in terms of the actual pro environment, which is what we're talking about for the most part, it's going to probably be interesting to see where that all ends up, in a sense. So, one thing that I will comment on, and I can comment on that part of it as a pro, there's certainly a hell of a lot less cost involved when you're sharing a facility or just a member there or whatever it may be, as opposed to owning that land, having insurances for that land, machinery costs, maintenance costs of machinery, staff involved. I'm sure Chad Reed could probably attest to that after, having used to own where the Lawrences are as opposed to where he's at now. It's a totally different scenario in that sense. So yeah, interesting. My opinions out on that fully until we have some more time really to really analyze it further.
Yeah, it's great to hear your thoughts on it, mate. I guess, yeah, all there, everything's all there. And it's, I guess, strange in some ways because motocross isn't a team sport. You're sort of bettering the
Yeah.
collective and you got to work out individually for your child or you as a racer if that really works for you. And it is good, a lot of those places in Florida, that kind of that part of the country, you don't have that travel time in California. So that's a massive bonus having a one-stop shop, just everything there at your fingertips to make adjustments on the bike and do everything there without having to drive back to the shop. So that's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, no, 100% is. It makes a big difference. And I mean, that's initially why I chose to be on the East Coast because of that travel time. But then, the actual benefit of being, I guess, in an environment where there's a lot less travel time daily to start with, you're not battling in traffic and for me, it was being in an environment where I was, I guess, isolated to a sense and being able to work on my own. But, I was, obviously with the greatest of all time, to be riding with him as a partner, which, I got a lot of benefit from. And then certainly, I guess for me, one of the biggest factors was, and I didn't know that at the time, but just being in humidity and practicing in that side of the country, which you do a hell of a lot more racing in than you do on the West Coast. So, yeah, I think there was a number of factors, for me to be in, out east and in a private track scenario.
Yeah, it's super cool, mate. And obviously, before we wrap up, any final thoughts? What you're looking forward to in Hangtown? Just what's going on with the youngsters, mate? Obviously, Levi's still recovering and Jagger's racing, mate. So, any final thoughts there you want to touch on?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Hangtown. I'm always so excited for any of the pro national round, MX pro national rounds in America. It's like I said earlier, they're iconic, and we've watched them as kids. I remember my nana would, tape them on a VCR, on, and then I'd get them, a few days later and watch them over and over till I wore the things out, and I think so many of my generation, feel that way about the national rounds in America. And each of them, like I said, each of them have that, sort of iconic view, when you go in depth to those tracks. And I just think they're so well presented on TV as well, so it just has that real cool factor about them on top of it as well. So, yeah, looking forward to I'm like I said, I don't think we see anything major changing at the top of the tree there in either class, that is. But definitely will be curious to see, some of the points that JT made there in terms of, ET going back to racing at Hangtown and it being such a favourable venue for him from his past, history there, and one of the most iconic race moto victories ever for him there in terms of, on the Honda against Ryan Dungey, who was one of the greatest ever, and eclipsing him by, what was it, well over like a minute and 20 minutes and 30 seconds, so certainly he's going to have, like JT said, a pep in a step when he walks in there this weekend. But then you flip that with Jett, and I know what JT said about him in terms of, when his back's against the wall and there's all of these pieces of the puzzle to him, that he can actually really say, right, well, I want to prove you're wrong. It seems that is the case with him. And so, yeah, it's setting up for a pretty titanic clash, really, if you talk about it like that. And we're only at round 2. So pretty mouthwatering, really, in that sense. And so, yeah, I'm having the weekend off. My youngest son, Jagger's been racing, I think he's done 8 race events in 7 weekends. We did a double up one weekend where he raced a national in Belgium on Saturday and a national in Holland on Sunday. So he's done a hell of a lot of racing in the past 7 weekends, and I'm ready for a weekend off. It's going to be nice weather here. We're going to check out the beach, which we haven't done yet, which my daughter's pretty fired up to go and see. She's a water baby, so she wants to go to the beach. And then, yeah, we'll be tuning in. I can't remember if it's appropriate timing here in Europe or not. I can't remember. It's pretty late at night, I think. Yeah, it must be. But, I'll be keen. I know my boys having the weekend off, and Levi's still, in the phase of recovering. He stayed up and watched the round. He was fizzing. He rang me the next morning and gave me a full rundown. So, yeah, we'll definitely be watching that. And, yeah, just looking forward to helping him get back into riding phase, which is not too far around the corner, to be honest. He's must be 7 weeks now He's got a checkup in a couple of weeks, and that should be to give him the all clear. He's just going through the final phase of his rehab right now, where he's back on his feet, and just basically going through getting it stronger and getting the confidence back in his league again, and hopefully get that green light for him, which I know he'll be chomping at the bit for in a couple of weeks, and then if that all goes to plan, I'll be back on a bike. So then I'll be back to. I feel someone said to me, "Oh, it must be like your halftime duty at the moment." I said, "Well, the amount that it rains in Europe, I feel like it's still full time with only one rider. So when we get 2 riders back, hopefully we'll be more into the summer and we'll see less rain, which is unlikely over here. But no, it's been really cool. Just this whole experience with our family over here and doing what we're doing. It's a couple of my mates said that to me. Just it got super busy in the approach to coming over here, and I was pretty stressed about the whole thing. Just putting it all together and that. And someone said, make sure you enjoy it and soak it up, and sort of I've really tried to do that. As a family, we've had some pretty cool experience for young kids to be over here and doing what they love, and I'm really grateful for what we're doing and the opportunity we've got.
Oh, it's super cool, mate. It's awesome what you're doing. And hopefully the weather does improve for you, mate, and you enjoy that weekend off. And it's always great to, get your thoughts alongside JT. It makes for some really great conversation, mate. So we look forward to more in the future. Obviously, massive shout out to Fly Racing. Go check them out online. Go check out your local dealers. Follow them on social media and check out all their riders in the Pro Motocross and MXGP paddock. And obviously, shout out to Firepower Batteries too. Obviously, joined forces with outfits like Club MX, so their stuff's quality. So also check them out on the socials and online. So thanks again, BT. Been a ripper chat, mate. All the best, and we'll catch up soon.
Yep, sounds good, mate. Look forward to it.
No worries, mate. Have a good one.